Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and I am the host of this podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I am also a newly minted USA Today bestselling author of the novel Blank. I've created a whole community of book lovers around this podcast, a publishing company, reading retreats, a bookstore, and more. Learn more at zibbymedia.com or follow me on social at Zibby Owens or join the community at Zibby Readers. Ruth Reichl is the author of the Paris novel, which is on my Destination Paris list as part of the summer reads on zibbymedia.com. So go check that out. Ruth Reichl is the New York Times bestselling author of 5 memoirs, the novel Delicious, and the cookbook My Kitchen Year. She was editor-in-chief of Gourmet magazine and previously served as restaurant critic for the New York Times, as well as food editor and restaurant critic for the Los Angeles Times. She has been honored with 6 James Beard Awards. In 2024, she received the James Beard Lifetime Achievement Award, and by the way, is one of my favorite authors. Welcome, Ruth. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss the Paris novel. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, not to embarrass you, but I am such a fan that I pulled out all the books.
Oh my gosh.
Reading of yours over the years. And I had to go all over my house to different bookshelves, but Tender at the Bone, Comfort Me with Apples, Garlic and Sapphires, Delicious, now the hardcover of the Paris novel, and Save Me the Plums. So,
Wow.
That's where I'm coming from. Tell listeners about what the Paris novel is about, please.
Well, for those of you who have read Save Me the Plums, there's a chapter in that book about my going into a dress shop in Paris and finding this dress that just transforms me completely. And it was the first dress that Yves Saint Laurent designed when he was at Dior. And I wanted to be that person in the mirror so much, but it was $6,000. So I didn't buy it. And when I turned that book in, my editor, the late fabulous Susan Campbell, said to me, I love that chapter so much. Don't you think you could turn it into a novel? Can't you just take that idea and make a novel? And the minute she said it, I was, oh yeah, I can see exactly where to go with that. And so that is what the book is about. The book is about someone who is very much not me, but who goes in and has this transformative experience with a dress, which I didn't know could happen until that moment in my life, and can really happen. And from that moment, her life starts over in a completely new way. And she has adventures. She goes from being a very timid person to someone who is just open to everything in the world, to food and art and music and literature and people. That's what the book is about.
It's so funny because in a book, you don't know where it's going to go. So when she put the dress on, I was like, okay, is this going to become like a magical realist type thing? Are we going to now fly? Like, what's going to happen to her? Or is it going to stay in something that really might happen? Because it felt so otherworldly when she put the dress on. She looked so gorgeous. She felt so different. So I was delighted that she stayed that she stayed like sort of at Les Domego, and it was like an actual story.
Yeah, yes, no, it's a real story, but it's a story. I feel like at this particular moment in time, we all need possible fairy tales.
Yes,
we all need to know that at any moment, something wonderful can happen to you, no matter how sad your life is.
Yes.
That you just don't know what's around the corner. And I mean, that really very much, that's what I love about literature. I love that it can give you hope and joy.
Totally. I completely agree. And she had a tough go of it. She had a really estranged relationship, or she was estranged from her mother, and then her mother passes away and leaves her with this inheritance, meager, only not meager, but meager in that it only covers the dress, right? This is like, She's like, should I spend my life savings on a dress or, to live for the next however many years? Tell us more about the dress experience you had yourself that you wrote about.
So I literally went into, I think it's probably the best vintage clothing store in the world in Paris. I've been going there since I was like 20. But never, I mean, it's filled with exquisite things. And you go into it like it's a museum. And when we were working on the Paris novel, on the Paris issue for Gourmet, I again went in there and for the first time allowed myself to try something on because I had a clothing allowance. And I did put on this dress, and it was this moment. I mean, the shopkeeper in the novel says to Stella, "Your dress is waiting for you."
Mm-hmm.
And the shopkeeper actually did say that to me. "Your dress is waiting for you." And I thought, oh, yeah, she says this to everyone. She gets out the most expensive dress in the shop. And I put it on, and it really, if you've never had the experience of putting on real couture clothing, it is amazing because it is made for the body of the person who buys it. I mean, it is handcrafted. And I obviously was exactly the same size as this woman. And it really did. I mean, I looked in the mirror and I was a person I had never imagined I could be. And I desperately wanted it. But $6,000 for a dress. And also, how often do you have an opportunity in real life to wear a, fabulous couture dress? But for years, I wondered what would have happened if I had bought that dress?
Mm.
Would my life be different? What if I had gone out and I had allowed myself to be that person? And so I got to imagine it for someone else and for someone who was much more in need
Mm-hmm.
of having a transformative experience than I was.
Wow. Oh, I just love that. That's amazing. Well, I love also that she takes the dress and, gets this bargain where she can borrow it for the night. And if she doesn't like it, they'll let her return it, which was genius, especially as a plot device. And then she goes off on this lady's assignment and is just sitting there and meets somebody who ends up changing her life and takes her all around and shows her Paris and everything else. And she's just sitting there in this gorgeous gown. Like, why not? Why not eat oysters in this beautiful, and a cold, what do you say? A cold Chablis or something? Is that what you said?
Yeah, she is a woman who likes to have, she's very orderly
Mm-hmm.
and she likes a plan. And the shopkeeper says, do exactly what I tell you to do. When you leave here, you will walk through the Tuileries and then you will go to Les Deux Magots and you will order oysters and Chablis, neither of which she has ever had before. And so she experiences her first oyster, and it is, and I got to try and imagine what it was like to have all these flavors for the first time when you were 32. And that was very fun for me to just imagine the joy of eating an oyster for the first time as an adult and really being in that experience and feeling the textures and the way it feels in your throat and the brininess. And to take, I love Chablis, and to take your first sip of Chablis, and she closes her eyes and she's like on a mountaintop and there's water running down the mountain and it's green, and she has these really extraordinary sensory experiences when she's tasting. And this lovely old man next to her says, "You eat with such intensity." And she's shocked because she hasn't even realized what she's doing. I mean, she's so in the moment. And then they embark on this friendship. And I loved the characters in this book so much, from this wonderful old man who is kind of like what I would imagine a fairy godfather would be like, only he's real and he he's in his 80s. And the book takes place in the 1980s. So this is a man who knew Picasso.
Hmm.
He knew everyone in Paris in the 20s. And so he tells her about his childhood, which is so different than
Hmm.
her, because, he was given a kind of freedom because of the war. And, he'd grown up in this very stuffy, aristocratic family, but in the war, all the rules went away, and suddenly, he was following Cocteau around. And so he tells her about all the things that he knows and loves about art, which, he's an art consultant, and he introduces her to art in a way that, that she had never known before. And then she discovers the great bookshop in the world. And I'm kind of stunned when I think about it. George Whitman, the man who started Shakespeare and Company, is such an amazing character. And the more I read about him, the more I thought, why doesn't he walk through everybody's book about Paris? Because he was such an extraordinary person himself. There's a sign in the shop that says, "Take what you need, pay what you can," because he believed that everybody needed books.
Mm.
And if they couldn't afford them, they should just take them from him, because it would change their lives. And he allowed people to live in his shop.
No, I was going to ask, did people really sleep there? That was a thing?
Over the years, 30,000 people have slept there. And
Wow.
people you've heard of. I mean, Ethan Hawke did. Frank Sinatra sent people there. And you can still live there.
Huh.
I mean, if you go on their website at Shakespeare and Company, they tell you how to become a tumbleweed if you want to. And I knew people who were tumbleweeds. I never did it myself. But I always thought, what an amazing thing to live in a bookstore.
Yeah.
It sounds like a fairy tale, but it is not a fairy tale. And when you walk through the store, there are little signs everywhere from people who have been tumbleweeds, and how it changed their lives. And when, that their children are coming now to be tumbleweeds in the shop.
Wow. I have a tiny independent bookstore in Santa Monica now. And I'm like, I don't know that there would be such a draw to sleep in the store. Like, yeah. But obviously getting lost in the stacks is it's such a dream, right? Just to have your imagination on play like the whole time.
It is. And, I think there's a reason why there are all these books about, magic in the bookshop. I mean,
Yes.
bookshops are, kudos to you for opening a bookstore. I mean,
Thanks.
it's one of the great joys of my life is that bookstores are coming back.
Hmm. Yes. There's something very special about just getting together, getting lost in stories. Amazing. What keeps you coming back? I know there was a specific idea to write a novel now and where that came from, but you've done a lot of nonfiction writing and the novel. And do you find one harder or easier?
Well, I have to tell you, I do not find writing easy. I hate to write. I'm, like most writers, I love having written, but I hate writing. And you keep writing because once you've done it, it's such a great feeling when good words appear on the page. And I grew up in book publishing. My father was a book designer, and so I've always thought that writing fiction was like the highest calling. And I always wanted to write fiction. I wasn't sure that I could. I was very close with MFK Fisher, who
Mhm.
said that she wanted to write fiction and did, in fact, write one book, which she made me promise never to read. She said, "It's terrible. I can't do it." And I have it, but I've never read it. But I love fiction so much. I mean, it's my drug of choice. It's, when things get bad, all I want to do is disappear into a book. And having been a journalist most of my life, I had this fantasy that writing a novel would be like reading a novel.
Mhm.
Can I tell you that for Delicious, it was absolutely not. I mean, it was harder than anything I've written. And I don't know why, but writing this book was like reading fiction. I mean, I literally said to my family every day, "I'm going to Paris now." And I would go off to my studio to write. And I was so convinced that it couldn't be good because I liked it too much.
It was too easy.
It was too much fun. I mean, I just loved being with these characters, and I literally every day wanted to find out what they were going to do. And so, I mean, if writing were always this much fun, I would have written hundreds of books.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's the unexplained subconscious, right? Who knows why some books are so much easier.
Right. And
Obvious.
I'm not sure it'll ever happen again,
Oh,
but
don't say that. Don't jinx yourself. Maybe it'll always be easier. Now you know how to write books. Now you know how
uh,
to write novels. Obviously, you know how to write books, but you know what I mean.
I'm about to work on a sequel to this book
Oh,
because I
no
love
way.
these characters so much. I just didn't want to give them up.
That's very
And I
exciting.
didn't want to end the book. And then I thought, you can end it because you can pick them up at another point in their lives.
So what point will you be picking them up?
About 10 years later.
Oh, so exciting. Well, see, that's smart of you because you gave yourself enough leeway by saying it in the 80s. You could actually have like multiple sequels.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
now we're moving into the 90s and it's a different time and they will be in a different place. And, I'm very excited to find out what they're going to be doing.
That's great. Oh, I can't wait to read that one. Oh my gosh. So I actually wrote my own novel recently called Blank, and in it, there's a woman who goes to open houses in secret in costume. And so in the book, I say she's just like you. And
Oh, my,
yeah,
I have to read
I know
this.
I have to find the quote. I should have had it already, but I said something like, just like Ruth Reichl and well, anyway, I can't find it now. I can send you a copy. But anyway, I thought of you every time
I'm going to go buy a copy. As soon as we end this, I'm buying a copy.
Oh, thank you. Well, you're in there because you inspired me with the whole, eating at restaurants and hiding yourself and all of that. It was brilliant. So,
That was fun too. Strange, but fun.
so a lot of your career has been in food, with food, loving food, giving us scenes like the oyster binge fest at the restaurant and just communicating that joy of eating. As you said, books are all about joy. What is it about food? When did you know that this was your thing? That like you were a foodie before a foodie was a thing, that you loved to read and write about it? Like, was it something that you always knew you would write about? Like, loving
Absolutely.
it is different, but
Absolutely not. I mean, I always knew I loved food, and everybody thought I was really strange. I mean, that jacket on Tender at the Bone is me cooking at 7.
amazing.
And so I always knew that I loved food, but it never there wasn't such a thing as a career in food other than being a chef. I mean,
Hmm.
there were 10 people who wrote about food when I was growing up, not even. So it never crossed my mind that that's something that I could do. And after graduate school, my husband and I moved to New York, and I got a job that I really hated. And we were living on at that time very scary Lower East Side, but it was a great food neighborhood. It was still, Little Italy still existed. I mean, all the moms would be there at the Pioneer Market and DePaulo's and Chinatown. We had this new influx of people from other parts of China other than Canton. And the Jewish part of the Lower East Side was still a vibrant, neighborhood. And so, I would just wander around the neighborhood, and people were so enthralled with this, 21-year-olds who wanted to know how to cook things. And people kept giving me recipes. And I would go back, and all our friends from college would come and crash on our the floor of our loft. And I'd make these huge dinners for all our friends. And one night, a friend of mine said, "You're such a good cook. You ought to write a cookbook." Now, today that would be ridiculous. But in 1971, when I went to a publisher and said, I have this idea for a cookbook, they didn't say, "Can you cook? Who's testing your recipes? Where are the recipes from?" They just said, "Oh, a cookbook by a young person. What an interesting idea." And they gave me a contract so I could And they gave me enough of it in advance to quit my job. And so I spent a year writing this very of its moment cookbook. And I realized how much I loved writing about food. I mean, I wrote about roaming around New York, and I got to put anything I wanted in it. And all my friends made art for I mean, it's a very strange little cookbook. But I then realized that one, I loved writing, and that maybe I could do some of it. I mean, I still didn't think I could have a career in it, but I thought I could write. So I started writing we moved to Berkeley. I started a restaurant with some people, but I was also writing for magazines, mostly about art, which was my field. And one of my editors came to eat my restaurant a few nights a week. And one day he just said to me, have you ever thought about being a restaurant critic? And it literally had not, I mean, it hadn't crossed my mind. And I didn't think, oh, this is my new career. I just thought, they're going to pay us to go to restaurants. I can take my friends. I was living in a commune, but I can take all my friends to restaurants. This will be fun. And so, I mean, that was really the moment but even then, I thought I was doing that until my real life started.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was till the LA Times hired me as the restaurant critic that it hit me that maybe that was my real life.
Is there anything you miss about the earlier days?
Oh my God. I miss so much. I loved living in this commune. I mean, I loved living in a group of people. I mean, there's always someone to talk to. There's always someone to cook for. And those early years in the food world were amazing, because now the press and restaurants have become kind of adversarial. But in those days, there was this little group of us who were all in love with food. And we were all in it together. It was like chefs and writers and we were sort of jumping up and down and saying, we could have good food in America. We could grow good food. And I miss that the excitement of it being something new and trying to pull other people in to appreciate it as much as we do. And that the way it was all changing, I mean, when I started writing about food, there weren't farmers markets.
Mm-hmm.
And, watching food become part of popular culture has been very exciting to me, where, when I had no money, we didn't go to restaurants. It just didn't occur to us to go to restaurants. My son has no money. It doesn't occur to him not to go to restaurants. He doesn't go to fancy restaurants, but, it's just, he would no sooner not go out to eat than he would not go to movies or buy books it's just, food has really come into the culture, and it's been fun to watch that happen.
Wow. I was out to dinner with my brother and his kids recently, and my little niece, who's 9, is now basically a real foodie, and she's like loves everything and knows everything. And we sat down, and she was like, "What's the grade of this Wagyu beef?" Is it? And she's like, "Oh, it's A4." And I was like, "What does that even mean?" And she went off and told me the whole thing. Well, there's this A and the C grade, but I was like, where do you get this stuff? So yes, I feel like it has trickled down. So now a 9-year-old can tell you the ins and outs.
And I wonder what she'll be eating when she's 20.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably a lot. And she loves to cook too. So there you go. I'll be eating at her house.
Yes. Yeah. You will not go hungry.
I will not go hungry. Yes, exactly. So what advice do you have for aspiring writers of all kinds?
Keep writing, follow your passions. I think, the thing I learned from this book is if you're writing about things you really love, it really can be fun. And the other thing is, it's very interesting when I wrote my cookbook, my kitchen year, and I was on book tour for it. One of the people who interviewed me on stage had me read from my first cookbook, which I wrote when I was 21, and read from my kitchen year, which I wrote a few years ago. And the interesting thing to me was that the voice was the same. And that's why she wanted me to read it. She said, this book was written 50 years ago. They're 50 years apart, these two books. And your voice is exactly the same. And so I wasn't conscious of having a voice, but it seems to me that it's important, whether you know it or you don't know it, to write the way you speak, to use your voice. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. I love it. And it's why people who have loved your nonfiction, like me, are very happy to read your fiction as well, because it's the same type of thing. Like, you kind of know what you're getting because you've built a brand around the way you see the world, which is a way a lot of us want to see the world, and your sense of humor and your descriptions and your wit and all of it. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's on the receiving end of that. It is very welcome. So
thank you. You are very good for my ego, may I say.
I'm sorry. I've been a fan. I've been a fan for a long time. I don't often get this way. I mean, that's not true. I get this way a lot. But I mean, like, you know, I've been reading you I just love the way you write. I just love it. I'm a fan. That's all I can say. So thank you. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Congratulations on the Paris novel. And
thank you for having me.
I want this outfit.
Oh, yes. I have actually, for book tour, I'm just starting book tour. But when I was in DC, all these women showed up dressed the cover. So I thought, yes, that's what I need to do. So I now have my book tour outfit.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks so much, Ruth. It was a pleasure.
Well, real pleasure for me. And I'm getting your book right now.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you love it, please leave a review and follow us on social at Zibby Owens and at Zibby Readers.